We should always identify with our ignorance, not with our knowledge. Since our knowledge is always limited, but our ignorance is boundless. This is profound. It's a profound statement. And it makes perfect sense. How? Let's explore the values that could be identified in this statement. First of all, identifying. What is the meaning of identifying? Identification. When I identify myself with something means what? Means I create, I produce a line of relationship between myself and that entity, whatever that entity is. Now, in life, we are constantly doing this. I am constantly, during the day, normal life, I constantly identify myself with different things. How do I know I'm identifying myself with something? Number one, compare and contrast. When I compare something of me to something else of somebody else's or something else by itself, that's identifying. That I'm inviting something from outside to be identified on some kind of comparison ground with something that I value within myself. It could be anything. I identify myself, let's say, with somebody. Let's say with somebody who has a lot of money to spend, a rich person. What does that mean? That means I bring in that value of having money in me, internalize it, identify with it. That means it becomes part of my value. So I like to have money. I want to have money. This is identification. Now, on the other hand, on the contrary, if I don't identify with something, I care less. Care less in a real sense of the word. Not that I say I care less, but I really do care, but I just pretend to care less. No, actual care less, that means you let go. That is de-identifying. You're letting go. You basically attach yourself when you identify with something, and you detach yourself when you de-identify. So that's the meaning of identifying with something. Now, then, we have two words here. One is knowledge and one is ignorance. Now, these are opposites. They're taken as opposite poles. It's very important to understand when we pit two things against each other and we call them opposites of each other. Very important. First of all, they both must be relative. They must be dependent upon each other for their actual meaning and definition. Otherwise, what's the meaning of ignorance? But there's no such a thing as knowledge, to know. Ignorance means not to know. Knowledge means to know. So if there's no knowledge, what's not to know? Compared to what? So these two gotta go hand in hand. There's a relativity that exists between knowledge and ignorance, just like all the other opposites, especially when it's taken within the limitations of finite. That means they are defined in a limited way, not infinitude, but finite. Hence the word relative. Anything that is relative, it's finite. Because infinity is not relative at all, because related to what? How could you relate anything to infinite? Infinite includes the totality. There's nothing to compare that to. Only the comparison can only take place between two finite entities or phenomena. Our knowledge is always limited, but our ignorance is boundless. Our knowledge is limited. What kind of knowledge are we talking about here? A wanting knowledge, limited knowledge. Even in relative terms, limited knowledge. Where do we gain that knowledge? That is always limited, always wanting, always lacking. We can continue gaining knowledge eternally, and we will never be able to call ourselves free from ignorance. Because the more we know, the more we lack. And here's the crux of the matter here. The ignorance due to the wanting, the lack of, the limitations inherent in knowledge itself. And this is what kind of knowledge? Formal knowledge. This is acquired knowledge compared to existential knowledge, which is innate. That's innate knowledge that is within our reality. We have been created with it. It's part of us. It's our reality. Acquired knowledge, however, we need to be educated for. It needs to be cultivated. We need to go to school. We need a teacher to teach us. Existential knowledge is innate knowledge. We're born with it. We die with it. Not that we cannot enhance it, perhaps through methodologies, or I don't like to use this word, but through certain steps of educational steps. However, the base, the foundation is existential. It's innate within us. It's not acquired. On the other hand, the knowledge that we are looking at right here in opposition to ignorance is relative and it's acquired. It's formal knowledge. This is the knowledge that we gain through our senses, processed through our innate powers, or spiritual powers, imagination, reflection, comprehension, and memory, and then the common faculty which bridges the physical powers that we have, which are the five senses that we have, and it bridges between these five senses and the spiritual powers, mind powers that we have. So because knowledge is always lacking, it's always partial, it's always finite, So just imagine now, you have infinite, although it cannot be even imagined, but we can think about the concept of infinite. Infinity in concept is all inclusive. Now, if I take a part of that infinitude, if I take a part of that infinity and separate it, would that hurt? Would this, what I just did by parting that piece from the infinity, would that cause the infinity to become finite? No, of course not, because infinity is always all inclusive. You cannot make a partition in infinity. Infinity is all inclusive, is always infinity. Always been, will be, is. There's nothing else besides. There's only one infinity which is all inclusive. So, that part that I'm taking and separating from the infinity is that part that we call knowledge. So what is rest? Or has it made any difference? No. The rest, which is the infinity itself, all inclusive at all times, is the opposite of knowledge, which is ignorance. So ignorance always stays infinite in compared to the finite knowledge which we acquire.